I think here is gonna be the best. You just don't get to see my sweater. The best time to wear a striped sweater is all the time. Welcome to 2025. It's been a little while since I posted anything, and you may be wondering, like, hey, Emma, why has it been so long since you've posted anything? What have you been up to? The answer to that is, like, really nothing. I do still stream, do other things. I watch TV sometimes, and I cross stitch. Did I finish any of the cross stitches I started this year? No. I also read 28 books last year. One of my favorite things to watch is BookTube, and everyone is doing their, like, what I read in 2024, and of course I'm going to be late to the trend, because when am I not? But I figured I would just, like, go ahead and delve deep into what I read. I'm going to start with my least favorite books and end with my favorite books. So I rate my books on a 5-star scale. So I'm going to start with my 1 stars and work my way up to my 5 stars. And I'll try to keep this spoiler free. If there are going to be any spoilers, I will let you know. Most of these books I do not own anymore. If I purchase a book and I don't feel like I'm going to read it again, I will most likely get rid of it and resell it. We'll jump into it, but I will try to keep my reviews spoiler free. Without further ado, let's hop in. To start off with my least favorite book of the year, it's going to be The False Pawn. I'll put it here. But this book I would not recommend to anyone. It was my 1-star video. It was my 1-star book. I would not recommend this to anyone. I would not read this again. And to let you know how much I did not like this book, I made an hour and a half long rant video that I never finished editing about it. So if you want to see my rant about this video, please leave a comment or like this video, and I will eventually finish editing that video. I didn't want anything else to do with this book after I finished reading it, and then I had to record a video because I was just like, my thoughts were everywhere about this book. And then when I was editing it, I was like, I don't want anything else to do with this book. So that's my thoughts on The False Pawn. So my second 1-star read of the year. So this book is called Late Bloomer. It's by Maisie Eddings. I gave this a 1-star. Basically, the story is about 2 women. One of them is like an aspiring artist. She's kind of down on her luck, and she decides she's going to purchase a house after winning some money, and buys essentially a flower farm, and decides that this is going to be the best place to live. Our other main character, she lives on this flower farm, and technically it's her inheritance, but she cannot find the will of her grandmother who owned the house, who she lived with, and her mother actually stole the deed to the house to sell to this other woman. So there's supposed to be, like, this whole, like, back and forth kind of tense environment, but instead all we got was it was just a little bit of a mess. For me, the characters in the story should have been compelling, but they didn't feel like real people. The main characters were lacking any depth, and they had the potential for depth, but the author just did not dive into it at all. And the side characters didn't even feel like relatively they could ever be a people. They were just like little puppets, like little side characters. I described them as plot devices and caricatures instead of them feeling like actual people. And when I'm reading a romance novel, I want the people in this book to feel like people and not like a bunch of puppets that were puppeteering to make them kiss. Like, if I wanted to do that, I would just go pick up some Barbies. The plot ideas, they had some great potential, but instead it was just filled with miscommunication tropes when we didn't need miscommunication. What we needed instead was these 2 people, like, butting heads over this, like, flower farm, and about, like, the people that have treated them poorly in life, and we didn't get that. Another note is that there are some bad guys, there's some, like, villains in this story, but the way that they're dealt with is in no way realistic, and there's no growth in our main characters to show that this is how they would deal with these people that have hurt them. I will also say the ending was lackluster. I didn't care for it. And to me, this book should have really connected with me because we had two neurodivergents, two people who loved the arts, and I am an ADHD bisexual who loves art, and I didn't relate to these characters in any way. They just felt like cardboard cutouts, and that was frustrating. So that was Late Bloomers by Maisie Eddings. I gave that one a 1 star this year as well. My last 3rd-star read of the year was called Three Queens by Geneva Lee. This is this is the 3rd book in a ongoing series, I assume. And I just did not like this. Originally, I gave it a 2-star, but the more I thought about it, the more I just did not care for it. Like I said, this is a 3rd book in a series of like a vampire romance thing. And the first 2 books I had a good time with. They're on this list, but this 3rd book, I felt like 70% of it was unnecessary. I didn't know what was going on half of the time. I felt like we lost all of our character growth and everyone was acting like toddlers all of the time. No one cared about their own safety or anyone else's safety. And I, to be honest, don't really remember much from this, but I did not care for the ending. I felt like we had 2 books that were fun, silly, goofy times, and then we like threw that out the window for whatever the hell this nonsense was. And it really did make me decide to not finish this series because I just did not like this 3rd book so much. So those are all my 1-star reads. So I only had 1 2-star read. It was curated by Nellie Wilson. Basically, this one takes place, our main girl, she is working at a museum as a curator. This museum is like a really small town kind of museum, and it is losing funding constantly. They're struggling with after the pandemic. There's also a science museum on this college campus that has a lot more funding, and community has essentially decided to merge these 2 museums into one, and there is just a lot of drama that ensues between these science nerds and these history nerds. Our main girl is the curator for the history museum, and our love interest is the curator for the science museum. So it's a really interesting dynamic. I enjoyed seeing these 2 characters interact from time to time, but I really, really struggled enjoying our main girl. She has anxiety and a lot of other issues, and while I understand that, it drove me bananas as a girl with anxiety. I was like, okay, this is a little much, girl. We're doing a little much, and you're supposed to be in therapy and like dealing with this. Like this does not feel realistic. This feels overblown to me. I did enjoy some of the spicy scenes. I thought that they were well done enough, and they did include toys, which I think is always a plus. I did enjoy our main guy, our love interest, a lot more. They have the big fight, like the big like act 3 fight. And it just felt unrealistic. I was like, I didn't understand why our main girl was so upset about this thing going on. So I don't know. I just didn't care for it. I gave it 2 stars. I might pick up the 2nd book in the series. I don't know. It was fine. It was a fun little afternoon read, but it was 2 stars for me. So next up is the 3 stars that I gave this year, and we will start with the first book that I read this year, which was Crazy Rich Asians. I absolutely I don't know if you know this about me, but I love the movie. It is like one of my favorite like flying movies to watch. I don't know, like if I know that I'm about to go on a flight, I like download this movie on my iPad or like look for it first thing on the airplane, and I just like chill out and watch this movie. It's just so there's something comforting about that movie that I just love. But I gave this a 3-star. I did enjoy the book. It was a very different from the movie, and I appreciated the differences and just had a good time with it overall. I can't really say much more about it. It was just a fun little in-flight read for me. I read it went on my way to Venice and when I came back from Venice. I did try to give the 2nd book a try and I had to DNF it. I just like couldn't get into it. Next up we have focus on it. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I gave this one a 3 stars. I felt like it was compelling. I felt like at times I couldn't put it down. I enjoyed the formatting and the inserts from the newspapers and the blogs, and this book did make me cry. I did feel like the gay and BIPOC representation felt like it was lacking in a true understanding of that time period and of the experiences of people during that time. I didn't feel like the discussions were completely there of what we were trying to do. I felt like that was a little bit lacking. I also felt like our main character, Monique, was just a little lackluster. I wanted a little bit more from her. She asked some weird questions or just asked some questions that I wouldn't even think of asking. And there were questions that I wish she would have asked that I felt like were right there on the table for her to ask Evelyn. I will say this book does have a twist. It was a twist. And the ending was just a little go girl, give us nothing. It just felt like a couple of the chapters were rushed through to get to the end of the book instead of resting on some of the topics that should have been rested upon. I would read this again, seeing as I did keep it, and I would probably recommend this book. I would say that this is more of a fun read than it is a read where we're discussing true topics. I feel like it grazes the surface, but it doesn't just quite get there. And I feel like maybe the author would have benefited from, talking with LGBTQ and BIPOC people from that time period and kind of getting to understand their experiences a little bit more. This just didn't feel completely there for me. So that's why I gave it a 3 stars. Next up, we have A House with Good Bones by T. Kingfisher. I gave this one 3 stars as well. Described as a Southern Gothic horror. I'm from the South, so I was like, this is neat. I would love to give this a shot. So I picked this up. It's basically about this woman who loves bugs. Her job is bugs. She gets a call from her brother saying like, hey, something's off with mom. So she ends up kind of getting some time off to go and spend with her mom and realizes that there are some weird things going on with mom. Like, she's painted the house back to the way that grandma had it. She's put up some interesting decor pieces, and so I felt like it was really interesting. And she's kind of thinking like, does mom have Alzheimer's? Is there something else going on? And I just thought that that was a really interesting read. I did give it a 3 stars. I thought it had a great atmosphere, it had pretty good pacing, and I enjoyed the imagery. I also loved that our main character is just a little bug girly, and I felt like it, kind of touched on topics of talking with family members from the South that are maybe a little bit behind the times, and kind of how awkward that can be, especially when you love those people. So 3 stars, would recommend, had a good time, kept this book. So another 3-star read for me was Lady Macbeth by Ava Reid. I do love Ava Reid. I also read A Study in Drowning this year, and I have now purchased like all of her other books and am reading all of them and really, really enjoying her writing style. I still enjoyed this author's writing style. I just don't think that this hit in the way that I thought it would. It was a little bit weird. I didn't really know where we were going with it. The pacing was off too. It would go really, really fast and then it would be slow for chapters. And then it would go fast and then it would be really slow. The end of the book gave me like the same vibes, like that feeling of like, oh my god, I love this author. I love what she does with her writing. But I just feel like maybe I need to reread this book. It was just a little, I don't know, there's something, I feel like I was missing something, and that's why I gave it 3 stars. There was just something missing from this book that I wanted to latch onto that I just didn't get from some of her other writings. Maybe I'll give this one a shot again in the future, but right now I'm gonna give it a 3 stars. I would still recommend this author. Maybe just don't start with this book. And last but not least of my 3 stars was Two Can Play. This one is an audiobook and it is exclusive to Spotify. It's Two Can Play by Ali Hazelwood. This one was fun. It was interesting. So we have this girl, she's a video game developer. She's kind of from an indie development team. Their team is kind of being tasked with this rival video game team to create a video game that she's like really excited to create from like her favorite book series. It was pretty cute, and the other video game developer is like the guy that she's interested in and had like a crush on. I actually kind of had fun with this. I tried to read Love Hypothesis like 3 separate times and I just could not get past like that 20% mark. So I thought maybe like Allie Hazelwood was just not for me. But like I had a lot of fun with this one. I don't know, it was really cool. And I also love it whenever a book is including stuff about a book that doesn't exist but exist in this universe. It makes me like 10 times more interested if there's a book in the book. And so that was kind of fun. I enjoyed that. The only thing I will say, I did not care for the narrator. She read super slow. I just didn't like the way that she read, so I put her in like 1.5 times speed or something just to like get through it, because she was like, I just did not like the narrator. I think I would have enjoyed reading this myself rather than listening to it. I would recommend it. Especially if you've tried Allie Hazelwood, if you tried like the Love Hypothesis and you didn't quite get it, and like you tried to pick up some of her other stuff and you're like, I don't get the hype. This one was fun. It was just a good little time and it wasn't super long, so it did make me interested in her, and so I went to the library and instantly started like checking out some of her other books. So now we will move on to my 4-star reads. So my first 4-star read of the year was The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey. This was a zombie story, and I didn't know it was a zombie story going into it, but it's a zombie story. You'll figure it out once you start reading it, but it's a zombie story. It's sci-fi, and don't normally get into too much sci-fi, but I actually kind of enjoyed this. I don't really get into zombie stories, but I enjoyed this. I felt like all of the characters were reflecting the different sides and facets of humanity and how we deal with things in a crisis and just how we deal with each other as people. It was just really interesting to see these different characters interact. I didn't like the ending, but I don't think that there was ever going to be a good ending. I don't think there was a way to make this book have a good ending, but it was an interesting ending. I would definitely recommend it to people, and I don't know if I would read it again, but I would definitely recommend it. My next 4-star read is Five Broken Blades by Mai Corland. This one is revolving around 6 different people, so it was a little bit wild. We have the 5 most dangerous liars in the land, and they've been mysteriously summoned to work together for a single objective: to kill the God King of their ruling. Like this, the kings in this universe of this country, they're like immortal essentially. Like they can't be killed until they take off this item, and then they can be killed. I would say this is a good time, but don't take it too seriously. It has some funny phrasing, but it was really fun to read. I will say there was one character that absolutely drove me nuts. If you've read the book, you probably understand. She just took things a little too unseriously, and I think that that's what took me out of it. It was like anytime I was in any of the other characters' perspectives, I was like, wow, this is a fun time. Like I'm just loving the vibes. I'm like loving the like we don't trust anyone here. And then we would get to this girl, and I was like, can we please take this a little bit more seriously? Like you're just being a silly goofy girl, and I don't want silly goofy girl vibes. And so it took me out of it a little bit, and I think that's why I gave it 4 stars, is I just didn't appreciate that character in the way that I think the author intended for the reader to. I did pick up the second book. It's hanging out there on my record player, so I am going to be reading it. My next 4-star read was Genderqueer, a memoir by Maya Kobabe. I thought that this was a really interesting read, especially for someone that I've never dealt with gender issues. I've always been very secure in my own gender. So I really enjoyed reading from the perspective that has had those kinds of issues and kind of been able to give me a little bit more understanding of what that's like. The pacing was a little bit weird. It is a graphic novel, so it's pretty quick to read. You could read this in like really 1 or 2 sittings depending on how you want to do it. The reason I gave this a 4-star, and I will say that this is a little bit of a spoiler, so if you don't want a spoiler on this, I would skip ahead, but the reason I gave this a 4-star was I just didn't like the way that they talked about the pap smear issue. The main character has to go in and have a pap smear done, and it is regarded in a very poor light. And I understand that these are issues that, as people with, the need to go and get a pap smear, it can be scary. And really difficult to experience. But I think that this maybe a reflection on my own issues with my own health issues, but I just wish that the pap smears had been dealt with a little bit more grace instead of making it feel like a pointless exam. But again, I can admit that I think that this might just be a me issue. I just don't want to scare people out of taking care of their own health. I think that that's where the issue lies. And again, I think that that might just be a me issue, but I have gotten rid of my copy. I did give that away. I would definitely recommend this, and I would probably read it again at some point. And I have seen that a lot of people have been trying to ban this book. So definitely, please, if you are against book banning, things like that, I would definitely read this, and I think it's an important story, and I think it's important to hear stories like this. Definitely recommend Genderqueer. I just think that there were certain parts for me that just didn't click for me, and I think that that just might be my own experience. And again, I'm willing to admit that this might just be a me problem and not a book problem. So next up, 4-star reads, we have Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarrow. If you have not heard of this book, I apologize for the fact that you've been living under a rock for the past year. This is like Dragon Academy school military vibes. This is editing Emma really quickly, popping in to say, I don't recommend Fourth Wing. I enjoyed Fourth Wing. I actually did enjoy Fourth Wing. I did actually give it 4 stars. The plot holes that I felt were there and some of the things that I thought were missing, I gave this book grace to be picked up and fixed in the second book. I gave the second book a 1 star. The second book is bad. It's not good. Rebecca Yarrow also has some issues on her own that I think you should look into as a reader and be cognizant of who we are consuming and who we are supporting as an author. That aside, the second book is bad. I would not recommend starting this book. I would not recommend starting the Imperium series. It is bad. The second book is bad. It is poorly written. The plot is not there. And from what I've heard online, the third book does not fix that. I do not recommend it. I just wanted to pop in here and say that because I recorded this video before I even started reading Iron Throne. Just wanted to say that really quickly. 3 months later, while I'm still working on this video, don't judge me. It was very young adult, and it has been pitched as more adult because there are some more adult scenes in here, but the writing was very young adult. It was fun. I had a fun time with it. I would not say that this is life-changing by any means. I would not say that this is like the best fantasy book I've ever read, but I had fun with it. It was silly. It was angsty. I could read it in I think I read this in 2 sittings. And I mean, it's a chunky boy. I think I gave it an extra star just because it has dragons in it, and I'm a slut for dragons. I just love them. It also kind of had the school vibes. It was fun. It was easy. I will say there was some interesting things in here. It's in the first couple chapters, but they talk about how this nation is having issues with military and having issues with not having enough people in its military, and in order to get into the Dragon Academy, you have to walk over a parapet, I think is what it's called, but you have to walk across this really windy thing, and if you fall off, you're gonna fall 100 feet and you're gonna die. So it was I don't understand why we have these kids that are willing to join the military, and we're letting them die, especially if we don't have enough people in our military. So there were things like that. That's why I say this is a little bit silly. So I would not take this completely seriously. But if you love dragons, if you want a fun little read, it's romantasy. I had a good enough time with it. It was, it was fun. And I read it in 2 days. So I do have the second book on my bookshelf back there. So I will read it at some point. I just never felt like picking up the second book immediately. So that's Fourth Wing. So next up on my 4-star reads is Filthy Rich Vampires. This is a first in the book. If you remember the Three Queens book, this is the first of that series. I gave this one a 4-star. I literally read it in 1 day. Think Wattpad vampires. It's just fun. It's easy. It's kind of nostalgic to that Wattpad time of my life. And I will say this one helped dig me out of a reading slump I hadn't read for a month. That's Filthy Rich Vampires. it's just a fun time. Next up on my 4-star reads is Second Right, which is also by Geneva Lee. It is the second book in this vampire series. I read this one in literally one afternoon. Like the first one, it was just a fun time. It was like goofy fan fiction vibes. I would not take this book seriously at all. It was just fun, and it helped pull me out of that reading slump. So that was a 4-star read for me as well. So the first 2 books were 4 stars. The third book was a 1 star. So I would say read the first 2 books and then just move on with your life. Next 4-star read for me was Galatea by Madeline Miller. This is an author that I have been interested in reading for a very long time. I just have never gotten around to picking up any of her books. So when I saw this, I thought the cover was really pretty. I thought that the idea of the story was really interesting. So I definitely wanted to pick it up and read it because it's just, it's a short little book, so I decided to do that. This one's a retelling of Pygmalion, the guy who basically like sculpts he like makes the sculpture and it comes to life and she's the most beautiful thing ever and like they fall in love. It's a retelling of that where this is Galatea, she is the statue that comes to life, and we open up the story on her in essentially like a mental hospital. I thought that this was really interesting. While this is a short story, I felt like it was just a wee bit too short. I just wish we had a little bit more substance to cling on to this one. I had a fun time with it. It was easy to read, really quick, but I just wanted a little bit more. I was left wanting just a couple more pages of development. That's why I gave this one a 4-star. It was just something missing from it. My next 4-star read was I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. I listened to this one in audiobook form. I've never been a big memoir person, but I feel like this book kind of opened me up to the possibility of listening to more memoirs. I just felt like there was a lot of interesting dissection of relationships with her family, with friends, with food, with herself, and like that left a lot to think about your own self and about your place in this world. And I gave that one a 4-star. It wasn't life-changing. It didn't have enough for me to give it a 5-star, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I feel like it's a very solid 4-star. Definitely would recommend this, and I definitely recommend it in the audiobook form. I just feel like listening to an author tell their own story, there's something very compelling about that. I have one more 3-star read that I didn't put on my list. Oh no, I skipped over this one completely. So another 3-star read was Conqueror by Ella Payne. This is a third in a trequel. This is the third in a trilogy series, and I gave this one a 3-star. I felt like it was an interesting way to end this trilogy. Next up for 4-star read is Counterpart by Ella Pine. Thought that this was really interesting. It had a great beginning, middle, and end. I just enjoyed our characters. It is about our main girl. Her name's Leda, and she doesn't want to be sacrificed. She lives in a kingdom where she is born where her sister is her counterpart, or she is the counterpart to her sister, who is a royal child. They both are children of the king. They have different mothers. Her mother is one of his mistresses, and her sister is the child of one of his queens. And in this world, he has made a pact with the gods to basically bring peace to his lands, and he's gonna prosper and thrive no matter what, as long as he is on the throne and as long as he sacrifices his children. So he has come up with this system of the counterparts. So every time a royal child is born, he also ensures that there is a counterpart born. Once he determines that the royal child is ready to go out in the world and lead a series of conquests for him, he orders them to participate in the ceremony in which they essentially kill their counterpart. It was a really interesting little world. She's not allowed to read, but she's taught herself how to read, and there was a lot to talk about with her own addiction to pain medications. I enjoyed the book. I thought the world was really intriguing. I thought the characters were really interesting, and after I finished this up, I instantly picked up the second book and had such a fun time with it. My next 4-star read is The Shadow of Kyoshi. So in 2023, I read The Rise of Kyoshi. I had a fun time with it. I am a big Avatar fan. I have read the comics. I continuously go back and read the comics. I read The Rise of Kyoshi, thought that was really interesting, decided to pick up The Shadow of Kyoshi. I did pick it up at the beginning of the year, but I just kept going through these reading slumps, and I never actually finished it until near the end of the year. I thought that the beginning was very slow, especially with how we ended the Rise of Kyoshi, but it started to pick up near the middle. Like once it kind of picked up right there at that halfway point, I like could not put it down. I gave this a 4 stars. If you're a fan of the Avatar like show and the series, I definitely recommend picking up the books. I've had a fun time with them so far. I'm on Yang Chen now. Yeah, I recommend these books. They're fun. Next up, we have a couple of 4.5 stars. I will say that Spiritor, which is the second in the Counterpart series, was a 4.5 stars for me. I read this one in a day. I loved the character development. I liked seeing the siblings connecting. I liked the angst of it. This one also had some like really crazy plot twist in it. It was a good time. Another 4.5 star read for me was Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. I also listened to this one in audiobook form. This one is basically kind of a retelling of the Ted Bundy murders. Takes that idea and puts it into an alternate universe of the killings are a little bit different and there's some things that are different. Tells this story of these crimes from the women's perspective. So we follow 2 women. One of them is the president of the sorority house in which he enters and kind of attacks these women, and the other one is someone who will eventually be his victim. It had some really interesting things to say about women during these time periods and about just so many other topics. There's one big thing that they really talk about, but I don't want to like give it away because then it kind of gives away a lot of the story. It was emotional and it was breathtaking and I wanted more. Definitely recommend this to other people. It had me crying at times. It had me like outraged at others. The reason I gave it a 4.5 stars instead of a full 5 stars, I felt like I needed just a little bit more. Ending was a little bit rushed. I would have been okay with it being a little bit longer just to fully flesh out some of the things that we were trying to talk about. My last 4.5 star read of the year was A Dark and Drowning Tide by Alison Sapp. This is a sapphic dark academia fantasy fairy backpack adventure like thing. Have this universe where it's kind of Germanic in a lot of ways, but we have this woman named Lorelei who is a folklorist studying folklore at a college, been basically tasked helper on a task force to go and find a fountain of power for the king. Very quickly on, the professor who she loves and who all of these other people are there because of this professor is found murdered, and where she's been murdered is a place where only Lorelei and some of her companions could enter. So it's also got a little bit of murder mystery. There's some fantasy. I had such a good time with this. I tore through this book. I loved the mystery. I loved the adventure. The only reason I did not give this a full 5 stars, the timing of the ending. The book ends in 3 chapters. The last 3 chapters are the ending, and they were really quick, and I just wish that there was just a little bit more development on the ending. Would have given this a full 5 stars. There were still some things that I felt like could have been tied up in a little bit of longer detail, and I would have liked seeing tied up instead of it just being like, and this happened, and so now you're here after these things have happened. And I also would have loved some more detail about the magic system. We don't really talk about it too much, which is interesting because the entire book is about the magic system, but I definitely really enjoyed this. I would read it again, and I definitely have recommended it like 20 times to other people I know. We are moving on to my 5 star reads. So I will start with a short story that I read that was a 5 star read for me. It was The 6 Deaths of the Saint by Alex E. Harrow. It's only like 30 pages, so I'm not going to give you too much detail. I will just say I sobbed. It was beautiful. I read this right after reading The False Pawn, which was my 1 star book of the year, so it was an excellent palate cleanser for that book. I would recommend this to anyone and everyone. It was just such a beautiful story. Like I said, it's only 30 pages, but it is one of the most beautiful things I think I read this year. My next 5 star read is A Study in Drowning by Ava Reed. This is about a girl who is going to college to be an architecture student. One of her favorite authors has recently passed, and a contest is opened up to basically redesign his home for his family and his estate, and she signs up for it. Surprise, she gets it as a first-year architecture student. When she gets there, she finds a boy from the English college, which is the college she originally wanted to go to, and he is there to try to disprove that her favorite author ever wrote any of the stories that he wrote, especially her favorite story. So remember when I said that I love books that have books inside of the books that they talk about? This is one of those books. books. Every chapter has an insert from another book in this universe. The vibes were there. They were immaculate. Because of this book, I have like picked up all of her books and started reading them. I would recommend this to anyone and everyone. A sequel is coming out this year that I have already pre-ordered. Love this book and I will probably read it like all the time. It is just, there's something about this where the vibes are just chef's kiss, immaculate. My next 5-star read, This Fatal Kiss by Alicia Jasinska. I read this as an art. I gave this 5 stars and had to pick this up in physical format because I loved it so much. The cover itself is so pretty. It's a teen YA novel about this girl who has died. She is now a Rusalka, which is the best way to describe it is like a water ghost or like a water demon. She's heard tell that if kisses her, not if she kisses somebody, but if someone kisses her, that she will turn back into a human girl and no longer be dead. But if she does not do this within a year of her dying, she will forever be this drowned girl ghost. Essentially, it is trying to go around kissing people and it is causing havoc in this town. For our other main character, our little exorcist here, he has been trying to exorcise her for like the past couple months now because she is causing chaos trying to kiss all of the girls and boys of the town. And then he loses his exorcism powers. So the two of them have to work together because they think that his loss of exorcism powers is due to her trying to get kisses. He has to help her to try and get her to just like leave the town alone and go home. I gave this a 5 stars. It was a queer romance. It was cute dialogue and the characters, they're just fun. I liked seeing them interact with each other. It had me kicking and giggling. It had some interesting folklore elements to it. I love it when we take folklore and like these fairy creatures, these like fantasy creatures from other cultures and create a book inside of that culture. I love that. I eat that shit up. It was a little slow in the beginning, but once it starts, it doesn't stop. It just keeps going. The ending has me begging this author to please give me a sequel. A sequel, something in this universe. Give me a prequel. I need more of this book from this author. I loved it so freaking much. I would recommend this to everyone. I just had such a fun time with it and I need more. I want a prequel of the grandmother. I want a sequel of our characters. I don't care. Just like vomit on a page and give it to me, please. I loved this book so much. And my last but very favorite 5-star book of the year was This Is How You Lose the Time War by Max Gladstone and Amal El Motair. I will just say, after finishing this book, I cried for a solid hour. I was sobbed like a baby. Like I hadn't cried. I hadn't cried this hard, I don't think, ever in my life after finishing this book. I want to eat it. It is basically about 2 time agents. One of them is a little bit more like cyberpunk and the other one is a lot more like plant-like almost. That's the best way I can describe it. They're time agents on 2 sides of a time war. They are leaving each other like little notes all throughout the time and space and these different timelines. The 2 of them turn from enemies to they start falling in love. It was just such an interesting way to tell a story because they're leaving notes for each other in such an interesting way. Like, for example, to not give anything away, they leave a note in the rings of a tree, and once the tree gets cut down, the other one can read the letter that is left in between all of the different rings of the tree. Oh my, and there's just like so many different weird ways that they leave notes for each other. A great way to tell a story. I was enthralled from beginning to end. I read this in one afternoon. Like I said, I cried like a baby afterwards. I highly recommend this to everyone. I loved this. This was just exquisite. I will be reading this like a billion times over. There was just something to this that I could not get over. That was everything I read in 2024. I don't really know how to end this video, so tell me one of your favorite books that you read in 2024, or tell me one of the books that you hated in 2024. Or tell me if you want me to finish making that video about The False Pawn, because I do have an hour and a half of footage about me ranting about that book, and I will totally finish editing that at some point and put it out there. So if you want that, let me know in the comments. Like the videos, subscribe to me. Thanks for watching. Okay. Goodbye.